Our two candidates for local Senate District 14, Mr. Cleo Fields and Ms. Pat Smith. We want to remind you that we will be taking questions from the working media and only members of the Baton Rouge Press, please, of the Baton Rouge Press Club. So we are going to have an opening statement from each of the candidates. It'll be a 2-minute opening statement. We will then take questions from our audience. Each candidate will have 1 minute to reply to those questions. And then as we begin our closing, each candidate will have 1 minute to close. So if we can start right now, we will start with State Representative Pat Smith, please.
Good afternoon to all of you, and I want to thank the Press Club for allowing us to be here today for this opportunity for you to hear from candidates in this Senate race. I am a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, and a great-grandmother. I'm an educator, and I'm also a former school board member. I've served in the legislature now for 12 years, term limited out, and I'm running now for Senate District 14. During the 12 years that I've been in the legislature, I have passed numerous bills. I've passed over 50 bills and co-sponsored over 300 bills. So it's important to know that I've been very busy while I've been in the legislature, and some of the things that I have passions for are education, of course, since I'm a former educator, education, early childhood in particular, and was so pleased that the governor passed the money for the early childhood program this past time, and the teacher raises. But I have been a staunch supporter of the people of the state of Louisiana for the past 12 years, and my reason for running is to be able to go on to the Senate to do some of the very good things that I've done since I've been in the House. I'd also like to tell you about the one bill in particular that is so memorable even for today. We had a gentleman vote today for the first time in 36 years. The felons voting bill that I passed in 2018 allowed felons who've been out of prison for 5 years to be able to get their right to vote back, and they got that back on March 1st of this year. So a very memorable day for Mr. Chico Yancey, and I have to mention his name because he was the face of the bill. I do want to say that I'm running for the Senate to continue doing the good work I've done, but also to continue being a senator for the people, because I am packed for the people. And I want you to know that I will continue to do that as the senator for District 14.
First of all, good afternoon, and let me thank the Baton Rouge Press Club for having this forum this morning. Before I make my opening remarks, I would like to, I just learned from Will just a few minutes ago that a former colleague of mine was killed on yesterday. I served with Chloe, and if you could just bear with me, and if you could just take a brief moment to silence and pray for his family. Amen. Thank you very much. My name is Cleo Fields. I graduated from Tennessee High School here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana in 1980 when I graduated from Maternity. Went to Southern University. I became freshman class president at Southern. My senior year at Southern University, I was a student body president, and I also served on the Louisiana Board of Regents as a student member. When I graduated from Southern University, I decided to go to law school. I graduated from law school in 1987. I decided to run for the state senate at 24 years of age. I was elected to the state senate and became the youngest one in the country. Served in the state senate for 5 years and then went on to serve in the U.S. House of Representatives. And I want to put a peg there because when I was elected to the House of Representatives, one of the big issues that I ran on, and that was education. And when I entered the U.S. Congress, I wanted to be a part of the education caucus. And I learned there was no caucus for education. So I got with Senator Wellstone on the Senate side, and we started the caucus for education. I say that not to brag. I say it because it's a doggone shame that in 1993, we didn't have a caucus for education in the United States House of Representatives. I'm running for the state senate. I appreciate the people in Baton Rouge vote and support. I'm number 64 on the ballot. And thank you very much, ma'am.
First question. Anyone? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question to Pat Smith. Good?
You want to just ask it, Representative Smith?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Well, Mr. Fields will get a chance to reply.
That'd be fine.
Ms. Smith? Your question, please?
After having served 12 years in the legislative body and looking forward to an additional 4 years, I'd like you to give me your opinion of the relationship you have with the governor and how you would continue that relationship.
Thank you for that question.
Could you repeat the question?
The question is asking my relationship with the governor and how I would continue that relationship. John Bell Edwards and I were elected to the legislature at the very same time, 2007, and we both served on the Education Committee together, and we were both very staunch supporters of those bills that we knew were great for teachers and for students in education. So I worked with him in education on Medicaid expansion. When he was elected governor, I supported him during his first term as elected governor. They elected as governor. I will continue to support him as the elected governor when he's elected for the next 4 years.
Thank you.
Mr. Fields, the question to Ms. Smith was about her relationship with the current governor. If you could answer that.
Well, I know the governor of the state of Louisiana. I've worked with him, not as a legislator, but I worked with him as a lawyer. That was a time that was not a single African American on the Board of Regents at a very crucial time in this state when there was a move to merge Southern University and UNO, Southern University of New Orleans. I worked with the governor, and to his credit, I mean, he worked very hard to make sure that that didn't happen. I filed a lawsuit, quite frankly, to keep it from happening, and Bobby Jindal ended up putting an African American as a result. I'm going to work with whomever the governor is, because I just think in this state we got to have coalition building. We got to have people who bring people together for the better good of the state of Louisiana and all of its citizens. I would have an excellent relationship with Mr. Edwards, but I would work with whomever is elected governor.
Yes, Robert.
Robert Burns, Sound Off, Louisiana. There have been, in the last 2 legislative sessions, initiatives to exempt certain occupational, from having occupational licensing, the most high profile of which has been hair braiding. The Institute for Justice recently sued the State Board of Cosmetology over what they deem to be overly restrictive requirements, 500 hours. I'd like to know, I'm going to get the question. I'd like to know how each of you would view another bill if it were introduced for the hair braiding, and also specifically to Representative Smith, can you explain why you voted against the last bill sponsored by Representative Julie Emerson, which Governor Edwards did actively support, I would add.
Mr. Fields, would you answer first, please?
Well, I think we should not only deal with, there's too many, and I've been fighting this since I was in the legislature years ago. There are just too many requirements, requirements in terms of license with sports and for professions that just don't need. I mean, it's just a lot of bureaucracy. Hair braiding, absolutely, I would support the legislation. Co-sponsor the legislation, and if need be, I author the legislation. I mean, at the end of the day, there are some things in Louisiana we ought not have to have a license to do. It's just too much bureaucracy, and I'm amenable, but if you look at my track record, I've actually voted in that respect.
Thank you.
Interesting you should ask that question. I co-sponsored the bill the very first year that Ms. Emerson brought that bill. The second year, when she brought it back, I believe that what happened on that bill is there was not enough communication between the legislature or Ms. Emerson and the Board of Cosmetology, because a compromise has to be made on that particular bill. That hair braiding falls under cosmetology. They want to require 500 hours. I think there's a way to compromise on that bill, so I didn't vote for it the second time because I don't think we did enough research to make sure that that compromise came about. And I do feel that course, I sponsored one of the first occupational licenses for the barbers to be able to get young people who are felons to be able to get barber license. So I'm for looking at how we can make sure that people get opportunities for jobs, and I think that's important.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, next question.
For Cleveland?
It's Will, it's gonna be a tough one.
Cleo, I know you say your official residence is on Hollywood. People insist to me that as a practical matter, you live at your house day in and day out on Highland Crossing. Can you address that and give me a general idea how much time you spend at Highland Crossing, say in a typical month, versus how much time you spend at your domicile?
Well, first, let me answer how much time, as much as I want to, because I own it. But let me address this issue, because I've heard some talk about it. You know, there is one constitution in the state, and there's one set of rules and regulations. And I have the right to benefit to live and operate under those rules and regulations. My domicile is 5347 Hollywood Street. It's been my domicile for 30-some years. Don't have any plans of changing it, will not change it. And if anybody had any doubt about where I'm domiciled, there is a mechanism. You can file a lawsuit. We had more candidates challenged across this state than ever before. You know, I don't know why I wasn't challenged, because I was looking forward to the challenge, because my domicile was 5347 Hollywood. Do I own other properties? Yes, the Constitution and the law of the state gives me the right to do that. But I'm not going to change my domicile, and I don't plan to change it ever. Thank you for the question.
Ms. Smith, there was a question about domicile in this race. Do you want to speak to it at all?
I think the article that was in the paper speaks to the issues that we brought forward on the residency and domicile. And I think the most important thing is that while the law provides you the opportunity to have a homestead exemption on a particular house and to be able to vote there, it's a loophole in the law. And I think it's important that when you do want to run for office, that you should live with the people that you want to represent.
Yes, Matt.
Should the legislature be in charge of redistricting, and what should that process look like, if so, in 2020?
Mr. Fields.
Yes. But let me quickly, loophole in the law. There's no loophole in the law as it relates to domicile. And so I want to be very clear. That's why no lawsuit was filed. Now, in terms of redistricting, you know, I've served, you know, I guess twice when we had to deal with redistricting in the state. There are some people who are of the opinion that we should leave it to a private commission to do redistricting. Others feel we ought to leave it with the legislature. You know, my attitude is, you know, we have to know that you can't take the politics out of politics. I mean, redistricting is a very messy process. You know, the politicians basically decide what lines and where they're going to go, and who's going to be affected. I do think when I was chairman of Senate and Government Affairs, one of the things I did, and that folk in this room can attest to it, I made sure that we took a road trip all across the state and had public hearings so people who were affected, which were all the people in Louisiana, had some input in that process. And I think we should do it again.
I heard this question asked of the governors, and every last one of them said that they should leave it to the legislature. We've done redistricting, and I've had an opportunity to do the 2010 redistricting as well. So that's at least gives me an upper hand as well in being able to go into the Senate to be able to redistrict. Of course, they redistrict different Senate judges and what have you. But I do think that the legislature can do it in the right way, because it's so important to look at how you balance districts to be able to get individuals who have the right to vote for a person that they choose to vote for. It's so important as well that the legislature look at this in a very mindful manner, since all the new laws have come out regarding redistricting, but I would prefer to see the legislature do it. And I don't know if you recall, but Bobby Jimbo made a comment the last time we redistricted, especially in the Senate, that if a bill was brought to him that he did not like, he would veto it immediately. I don't think that we would have that problem if we were able to do that in a balanced manner.
I would like to ask you each a question. Each of you have had the opportunity to serve in the state legislature, and of course, Mr. Fields, who served in Congress. Can you share with us today what you think your most significant action in that capacity has been in your career?
I would have to say most significant was working with the colleges and universities in my district. Before every legislative session, one of the things I did, I met with the president at Southern University and the president of LSU. And now Baton Rouge Community College is a part of the 14th Senatorial District as well. I've always considered the 14th District as the hub for higher education in the state. And so I pride myself on the fact that every budget that was introduced by the governor of the state, no matter if it was a Democratic governor or a Republican governor, I was able to get additional funds for both LSU and Southern and make sure that higher education, at least in the 14th district, had a fair shake. And I'm going to do the same thing, including Baton Rouge Community College. Last 15 seconds, also in Congress. I mean, I started the education caucus, because, you got, 435 members of the House, and they have caucuses for everything, Black caucus, Hispanic caucus, and then have an education caucus. So those would be my pride, issues that I dealt with.
I have a number of them, and I'm going to give you a couple of them. But one, while I heard Mr. Fields talk about the merger of Southern University and UNO, I stood the ground. And on the front page of the paper showed me holding the line with Jim Tucker not being able to bring that bill to the floor for a vote. So as the chair of the Black Caucus, that was something that I feel very proud about, that Southern University did not lose its status as the only HBCU system in the country. But I think my criminal justice bills as well would be very satisfying for individuals in the state of Louisiana, because it crosses the spectrum of how we've been able to deal with mass incarceration in our state. In creating bills not only for the men, but looking at the task force put together for women. And early childhood definitely is something else that I'm extremely proud of, because I passed the only early childhood bill for the deaf children in the state of Louisiana.
Mr. Gary.
I do an outdoor show that I've been involved in outdoors for years, what's going on, work with the wildlife and fishing. There's a lot of controversies coming up in this legislature. One is land use. One is water right-of-way use. The governor has appointed a task force to study, which is to his credit. But we got water diversions, silt diversions, a lot of things coming up. This legislature going to come to a head. Are y'all aware of these problems? And I'm just you being in the legislature right now. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, I think the question is from an outdoorsman. He wants to know about your views on water use and diversions and that sort, that as it may relate to outdoor activity and outdoor sportsmanship. Ms. Smith.
This was indeed an interesting conversation that went on in the legislature, because when you talk about right-of-way in the water, we had to figure out where in the world does the line stop, because folks were saying their land went out into the water, but no one could tell us. So I'm very pleased that the governor has put a task force together to provide recommendations to the legislature to be able to come up with some great ideas on how we challenge and work through this issue. Because you're right, diversions, the diversion canal, you're talking about also all the silt that we have, and also, and just the idea of the right-of-ways and who owns those right-of-ways. We can't deal with that. I think that's really a court issue. So I think the legislature really has to come up with some recommendations on that. Thank you.
I'm going to be very honest with you. But whatever issues, one of the things I try to pride myself on, and that is bringing people together to discuss problems, and then forcing them to make good solutions. And many times, both sides leave, unhappy. But at the end of the day, Louisiana moves forward. When I was in the legislature, we had a big fight between the commercial fishermen and the recreational fishermen. And one of the things we had to do was pull both of those sides together. So I'm willing to work with, property owners to make sure that they're not adversely affected in an unfair way, to make sure that land use and water right-of-ways are respected. So I'm looking forward, if you like, to working with you and all parties that are concerned.
Ms. Courtney.
So both of you are supporters of public education, K-12 education. I'm wondering what your reactions are to charter schools, expansion of charter schools, one thing. And the other is, do you think the MFP should be dealt with at all? Should we look at how we fund K-12 education?
We'll begin with Mr. Fields. Again, your comments on K-12 education and also your comment on charter schools.
Well, let me take on charter schools first. Look, I've said, and I've been very clear on it, I'm not pro any school, be it charter, public, or private. I'm pro children and education. I think we've spent too much time in this state choosing one group against the other, pitting one against the other. And then at the end of the day, little Tyrone, who's trapped in a school because of his zip code, can't get educated. That time in Louisiana must stop, and it must stop right now. I'm going to fight for good schools, and I don't want kids and parents to be trapped in failing schools just because of where they live. And so I'm going to fight hard for that, Courtney. And it's not pro or against, public education or charter schools. It's about being pro education for children.
Do you think the MFP should be looked at, changed?
Yes, and I think the money should follow the kid, quite frankly. Now, in terms of how much, I'm always fighting for more, MFP dollars, because I just think there's nothing more important we can do in this state than educate our children. Nothing. I mean, absolutely nothing. Thank you.
I'm going to start with the MFP. It does concern me opening up the MFP, because if you begin to open up the MFP, as some of my colleagues had determined they wanted to do, it would mean that school systems would be coming to the legislature to beg for money. And I think that's so unfortunate that we would have that issue come up that way. The MFP can be tweaked as the formula is looked at. But I do believe that it's important that we do keep funding for education on the rise, because it's very important that we continue to fund our schools, which we're not funding to the fullest at this point in time. But we need to continue to put funds in, and I'm glad the governor put $40 million in the MFP this past session. But as far as charters are concerned, my issue with the charter program, as I have always said, is the law. The charter law, when it was first put into place, stated that it was an experimental laboratory program for innovative learning that should be replicated in our traditional schools. That has not happened since charters have been in place, and that's what I'd like to see happen. Thank you.
Yes, Robert.
Given that the state is running a $500 million surplus now, would either of you be in support of, and given that the sales taxes are typically deemed regressive, would either of you be in support of Lance Harris's intent to bring a bill that would scale these sales tax increases back much faster than they're presently scheduled to roll down?
I'll look at it from a holistic perspective. First of all, sales tax are regressive. I mean, they're the most regressive taxes we have in the state and in the country. And Louisiana has the highest state sales tax, certainly in this region, and maybe in the country. So I would absolutely look to bring those sales tax down. But I want to look at budget as a whole first. I'm not going to stand here today and say I'm going to do it, absolutely. Not looking at what kind of problems it may have on the budget in the future. But I do agree with you, we have to be more consistent with passing taxes that are more progressive and less taxes that are regressive, like the sales.
In 2008, after we took our oath of office, we recognized that we had a $2 billion surplus. And in by 2010, it was gone. So when you begin to talk about surpluses and what you do with the money, it's very important to recognize when you do something on one end, you may affect something on the other end. So by taking away and looking at the bill that Lance has tried to even bring last time, of reducing or doing away with the 4.5 sales tax, I think it's important to look at true tax reform. I think we need to have true tax reform in our state, and we need to develop a mechanism on how to do that, rather than taking away something that we don't know in the long run whether or not we would need it. And it was put in place for a certain period of time, and it will go away after a certain period of time. So I think that's important that we look at how that budget is crafted, but true tax reform is extremely important in Louisiana.
Yes, Will.
Patricia, some of your comments during the campaign about character and integrity have indicated that that's one thing that separates you from Cleo. Can you comment on that?
Well, okay, thank you. I use those terms of character and integrity quite often in my campaign speeches because I have integrity. I think in the legislature you can talk to anyone there that tells you that I have a word. If I have a word, that word is going to be that I can do something, or if I can't do it, I will come back to you and tell you that I can't do it. But the most important thing is that I have respect in the legislature by many of my colleagues who work together with in the legislature. I've been told that we work together on various bills that are important to the citizens of Louisiana. I've never sold my people out. I will never sell my people out. I never will make a compromise on something that I feel is going to impact the people that I represent in the long run. And I think that's so very important because the people are the folks who put you there, and they're the people that you want to represent and ensure that they get the best that you can give them while you're serving.
If I could follow up, in your opinion, does Cleo have integrity or character issues that voters need to take into consideration to decide?
Well, I think that the whole idea of looking at candidates is what they've done, what they've been doing, and how they have reacted in the public as well as reacted to people. And Mr. Fields, I'm sure he's going to comment on this, I'm not going to say whether he has a character flaw or whether he has an integrity flaw, but I think it's important that he also determines whether or not deals that he makes with individuals are not going to impact the people that we represent. That's going to be his answer for you to give.
Mr. Fields, I think we extended that time, so we'll give you some extended time to respond.
I yield back the balance of my time. But look, I don't know how to answer the question because it was to Representative Smith. But certainly the representative would not question my character or credibility because the last 3 times she ran for state representative, she sought my support and I supported her. So, look, character and integrity matters. There's no question about it. And working for the best interest of the people of this state and of the district in which you represent matters. And that's what I've done. For the past, first 5 years I served in the state senate, and then the 4 years I served in the U.S. House of Representatives, and then the 10 years, the 2.5 terms that a lot of people know about in the state senate again. I was pleased to support Representative Smith when she ran for the House of Representatives, and I'm glad she sought my endorsement. But let's be very, very clear. People in this district have elected me 3 times, and and they have not questioned my character. And if they did, they have concluded that I was of good and moral character, and I've served the people of this state at least 3 times.
David Jacobs in Center Square. Could you please comment on Mr. Fields' relationship with former Governor Edward Edwards as it relates to the FBI investigation during the 1990s, and how voters should consider that, if at all?
Well, I think the question is how should voters look at a meeting I had with the governor?
As it relates to the FBI investigation.
As it relates to it. I think they should look at it very carefully because, quite frankly, you know, the voters have looked at it at least 3 times I've been on the ballot, and they have concluded that I was worthy of the opportunity to go back to the state senate, and I thank them for that. But let's be very clear. You know, my opponent takes a lot of shots at me, you know, all the time. You find me a man or a woman or a child who hasn't made a mistake, you just found somebody who hadn't done anything. Am I a perfect servant? No. You know, I'm a public servant. Did I do anything illegal or wrong? Absolutely not. But don't take my word for it. Take the people who do the investigation. Take the FBI word for it. Take the Justice Department's word for it. If I'd done something wrong or illegal, they would have been indicted. They didn't. You know why? Not because they were doing me some favors. They did not because I didn't do anything wrong. Secondly, you need to be mindful. When I get these attacks from my opponent, be mindful of the fact I was a private citizen. But I'm not using it as an excuse. But I was a private citizen, you know? And I'll put my credibility against any person in public office, not only across this state, but across this nation.
Ms. Smith, would you like to speak to that issue?
I'm only going to say that folks ask the question all the time, and Mr. Fields has an answer for that question. So it's up to the people to determine whether or not that is an answer they will accept or not accept. And I'm not going to say any other thing about it because it's out there, and the issue was unindicted co-conspirator for the issue. So I'm not going to say anything else about it. He has an answer for it, and it's up to the people to determine whether or not they accept that answer.
Hi, Jackson. And I assume both of you know about it, being a lawyer and former legislator, and you being a legislator. Would you be in favor of an appropriate amendment or an outright repeal of a statute that's been on our books for more than 80 years, revised statute 30:51, which I submit exists as a potential get out of jail free card for the oil and gas and petrochemical industry?
What's the question?
What's the question?
Would you be in favor of an appropriate amendment or an outright repeal of that law? Because it depends on what was made known to the Attorney General, not what was made known to the district attorneys.
And which law is this, sir?
Revised statute 30:51.
What is it?
Are you familiar with that number? Can you state that law for us?
Yes, ma'am, I can. It essentially says, sir, that anytime the state wants to sue the oil and gas or petrochemical industry, anyone, in connection with a violation of a law, rule, or order pertaining to the production, transportation, or marketing of those things, it must have been brought within 3 years from the time it was, quote, made known to the Attorney General. That's all it says. It's been on the books for 80-something years, and there's not been a reported decision dealing with it, but there are a few people that have dealt with it and can tell you that it has cost this state billions of dollars. Would you be in favor of looking at it to examine an appropriate amendment or an outright repeal of that law?
Yeah, I will answer the question. Let me first say that, you know, yeah, I have tough skin and I take a lot of attacks. You know, people can always see speck in another person's eyes, but they can't see a log in their own. You know, but I don't like people making comments that's offensive to me and my family, my 2 kids, my wife, that are not true. So, you know, and some people feel they know more about the case than I do, but the truth of the matter I wish somebody show me some document that says that I'm some kind of co-conspirator, and I just hope that people stop saying that unless they have facts. Now, to answer your question, I will work with you, Ike, to deal with that. You're talking about a prescriptive period, is what you're talking about, 3 years. We can sit down after, this race is over with, we can determine whether or not 3 years is enough, or 3 years is not enough, and debate it and see if we can get some legislation that would be more suitable. At the end of the day, I'm one who's going to protect the interests of property owners in this state. We fight battles over land, and we have to always protect the interests of property owners.
I'm not an attorney. And you sound like somebody when I go to the prisons and I talk to the prisoners and say, how about changing this law? How about looking at my case with you? I'll go back to the legislature. I think it's important that when you bring things up like that, to have a very in-depth dialogue on what's been the issues in the law. And in order to change the law, you really have to bring the resources and the research together and have people at the table to determine whether or not it is beneficial to change it, an amendment, or to do away with it altogether. It's just like I tried to do away with the sodomy law. They wouldn't let me do that either.
Mr. Hightower.
I want to know what the current situation is on Medicaid. There have been several attempts to, I guess, go after allegedly fraudulent recipients. It's been brought up in the legislature a couple of times in the last 2 years. So I just wonder what your take is on this situation, and will there be more legislation to address it?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Well, I guess your question, Mr. Hightower, is what legislation and what attempts will be made in the future on Medicaid abuse?
Yes.
I don't know what legislation is pending, quite frankly. I'm not there. But I do think we have to respect the integrity of our Medicaid system, and we have to make absolutely certain that it's not abused by providers or anyone else, quite frankly. And I'm steadfast on that. I just don't think people ought to abuse government's programs, be it Medicaid or any other program. And I will work hard to make sure that there is little to no abuse.
Medicaid expansion has been a hot topic, for the past couple of years, and even since the governor made the executive order to initiate it. But it's also important to recognize that statistics have shown that the more fraud that happens in Medicaid expansion is from providers, not individuals. And what happened is a lot of my colleagues began to look at individuals, and those individuals, based on income, were put on Medicaid by providers. And so they were trying to come up with another mechanism of how to determine whether that income was correct or not. I think we always need to do an investigative report on ourselves, evaluate ourselves on whether or not we're doing the right thing. But to know that there are almost 500,000 people on Medicaid today with health insurance, and there are issues right now going on trying to eliminate some folks with pre-existing condition with the lawsuit going on. I think it's important that we recognize people in Louisiana have gotten health care and really need to continue having it.
Matt.
Who's answering first?
Ms. Smith. I think
Okay.
Mr. Fields is on first.
Representative Smith, I wanted to know your reaction to finding out that Cleo was going to run in this race. And then my question for Cleo is, you talked about your support for Representative Smith in the past. Why ultimately did you decide to get back into politics and challenge?
That's an interesting question because, I ran against Mr. Fields in 2003, and of course he didn't speak to me for 4 years. I don't know if he remembers that. but definitely when I ran, when he was not able to run again, yes, I did seek his support, and he supported me for those years that I ran. Well, when he called and said he wanted to meet, we met. I had a meeting with him at Highland Coffee, and he told me he was going to run, and we had that conversation. And I sent him a text back, and I said, you know, there's an open seat in the House. Would you like to run for the House? So we had 2 people. He never answered.
I didn't answer probably because I don't run for office just to run for office. I run for office to serve the people and the good of the state. You know, it took a lot for me to run for District 14. There were people who wanted me to run, you know, 4 years ago, 6 years ago, 8 years ago, but I chose not to. And I chose not to because I did not want to run against an incumbent. I didn't want to take a seat from anybody. But I did decide that I was going to run once the seat was vacant. Now, let's be clear. I try to run a very clean campaign. Don't like to criticize anybody, no matter how many attacks that come my way. But District 14 has not had a senator for 12 years, and that's wrong. And I'm running because we need a senator. You know, and this is not a game. You know, the people's lives are at risk. And the only reason why I'm running is because we haven't had a senator. You got Southern University folks in. They need a senator there. You know, they have not had a single senator from that district for 12 years, and it's just wrong.
Ms. Corby.
Sort of in that same vein, there are groups of legislators who come together to support Orleans, be they Republican or Democrat or whatever. The Acadiana delegation has a group. Baton Rouge always seems to be fragmented. So talk to me about how you're thinking about the capital region and how it might come together as a powerful force.
Well, you know, Courtney, that's a very good.
Beth.
Beth. That's a very good question, Beth. And, you know, we have to have legislators who can work with other legislators. And quite frankly, I pride myself on that. I mean, you look at the endorsements I have in this race, you know, that's because I'm a coalition builder. I bring people together. You know, the problem we have in this state, we talk at each other too much and not talk to each other. So I'm looking forward to bringing all of the members of the Baton Rouge delegation together so that we can work for the betterment of Baton Rouge. And we did that when we were in the legislature, quite frankly. We worked hard to do that. I spent a lot of hours in doing that. And I want to thank the Baton Rouge Chamber of Commerce, for example. They worked profusely to try to bring that Baton Rouge delegation together to talk about issues that affect the Baton Rouge region. So, yes, I will do that. I've done it in the past and will do it in the future.
As a part of the Capital Regional Delegation, we're the largest delegation that exists in the House, well, in the state legislature. And the unfortunate part of not being able to come together is everybody was territorial. And when you talk about looking at even the capital area, there were only certain things that we could bring together to come to a conclusion on that we wanted to have happen. We did come together on the bridge, which was important. But when you come together as a capital region, the way that projects were chosen, we were kind of always outnumbered for the Baton Rouge area because of other areas. And so the way the process happened, we voted on them. And our votes didn't really count in many instances. We had to fight for Southern University to be able to get some of the things that they got in the capital region that the group would support. So it really is important that we come together and understand that everybody counts. Everybody matters in that delegation, and we can't just be one-sided on how we actually do projects for the state of Louisiana or even for the region.
I'm going to ask that each candidate now give a 1-minute closing statement. Since Ms. Smith opened up, we'll ask Mr. Fields to be first at this time, and then that will leave you guys with about 5 minutes before the 1 o'clock bell tolls in case you need to grab them for an extra question. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I want to just thank each of you of the Baton Rouge Press Club for having this forum. It's very simple for me. I want to go back to the legislature to finish the work that I've started. District 14 has been without a senator for 12 years. That's wrong. People of the 14th district, and I want to fix that. I want to fix education. It's a serious problem in the state. I have a very strong track record. The first thing we got to do is pay teachers for the work they do. And I'll often say we got to treat education just like we treat, our sports team. You hire a person, you hire a coach, you pay them for the work they do, and then you expect results. Why don't we have the same approach in education? Let's hire good teachers and good principals and good superintendents, and let's pay them for the work they do, and then let's have some benchmarks. And we expect these kids to succeed. And that's all I want to do. I want to improve education. I want to fix this traffic problem. This traffic problem, I've been talking about, I don't have 1 minute, but I've been talking about this bridge problem since I got there, and it has to be fixed, I put $3 million in the budget to study this problem, and it appears that all they did was study the problem. Now it's time to fix the problem.
Well, District 67 did have a representative, and a representative that worked hard for the people that I represented. And that's why, since I've been that representative for District 67, which included LSU, it's now expanded to include Southern University and other areas in District 14. I want to continue the work that I've done and the good work I've done for the people of District 67 and carry it over to the added precincts and added people in District 14. I have been there working hard. I've been a champion for many, many social issues as well as other issues in the State House. I want to also make sure that we get minimum wage. I want to make sure we get equal pay. I want those things that I know are going to affect the people that we in the state of Louisiana really need to have happen. I want to keep Medicaid expansion, but I do want to see 0 to 3 and pre-K and K-12 education and beyond be accessible to all children and to have quality education for all. And that's what I've been working on and want to continue working on since I've been there. Thank you.
I want to thank both of you for coming today and taking your time to share on your platforms with us, Mr. Fields and Ms. Smith. I want to encourage you to come back next Monday. We will have Senate District 15 represented that day. Mr. Gary Chambers and, I'm sorry, the other candidate? Mr. Barrow, I'm sorry, will be speaking to us next Monday, so please join us at that time. Thank you.